Hello, everyone. So, for week two of leadership, we will be talking about the traits of leaders. Okay, so we will talk about the great person theories, we will talk about historical shifts in the trait perspective, and what is the differentiate leaders, like what traits differentiate leaders, and how does this trait approach basically work. First of all, we have the great person theories. And if you remember from last class, we talked about the traits of leadership, which is basically the characteristics of a leader that determines whether someone is going to be a good leader or not, or whether someone is suitable for leadership or not. So, like previously, it was decided based on the traits. Okay, the trait approach is one of the first systematic attempts to study leadership. And we have this theory, which is called the great man theory. It is from the early 1900s. This theory basically focuses on identifying innate qualities and characteristics possessed by great social, political, and military leaders, which basically means that these are things that are already within a person that determines whether this person is suitable to be a good leader or not. It's about the characteristics of that person which they already possess. We have this timeline which shows the historical shifts in the trait perspective. Remember last class we also talked about this. We said the first time research only focused on individual characteristics of the traits of the individuals that universally differentiated leaders from non-leaders. So it was about the qualities of a person that will determine whether this person is a good leader, can be a leader or not. If you do not have these qualities, then you cannot be a leader. It's not about learning them, you must have them. And then we moved on from there to this traits interacting with situational demands on leader. So then the research focused, or let's say shifted towards saying that it's not only traits or characteristics of leaders, rather it is the situational demands that creates an effect on the leaders. For example, we have Landmark Stockdale from 1948 that studied and analyzed it, synthesized 124 traits, which said that leadership it's reconceptualized as a relationship between people in a social situation. Okay, so it's about the leaders and the situation they are in. And then we have Mann from 1959 who reviewed 1,400 findings of personality and leadership in small groups. And his study basically less emphasized on situations and suggested personality traits could be used to actually differentiate those who are leaders and from those who are not leaders. And then we have the 1970s to the early 90s, which is the revival of critical role of traits in leader effectiveness. Then we have another study by the Stockdale that analyzed 163 new studies within 1,948 study findings, and he validated the original study that he did, which basically came up with 10 characteristics that positively identified with leadership. And basically, he's saying there are 10 characteristics that if a person has, then this person can be a leader, literally. Okay, then we have Lord Divider and Alliger from 1968. They did a meta-analysis and they said personality traits can be used to differentiate leaders from non-leaders. And we have the Kirkpatrick and Locke model, which says there are 6 traits that make up for the right stuff for leaders. So if a person has these 6 traits, then they can be a leader. And then we have present day, which says there are 5 major trait leaderships. If you possess them, you can be a good leader. First of all, you need intelligence, self-confidence, determination, integrity, and sociability. These are the 5 traits that are considered the good characteristics of a leader. So let's talk about each one of these. The traits to possess or cultivate if one seeks to be perceived by others as a leader, what do you need? If you want to be seen as a leader, if you want to possess leadership skill, what do you need to have as traits? In the present day, the first one is intelligence, which you have to be intelligent verbally. Your communication should be very good, perceptual, and reasoning capabilities. Okay, so it's not only about, let's say, having great ideas, it's about how you turn these ideas into actual concepts, and at the same time, how you communicate them all in an intelligent way. And we have an example that says, for example, if let's say the leadership intelligence trait is actually visible in Steve Jobs. The second trait is self-confidence, which again is, let's say, visible in Steve Jobs. It says certainty about your own competencies and skills. You must have confidence that you have the ability, you have the skills, you have the competencies to become a good leader. And then you need determination. Now that you have the intelligence and you have the confidence in yourself that you are intelligent, you need to be determined. You need to have the desire to do the job. Okay, you need to have the desire to be a good leader and continue taking initiatives, to be persistent, to drive your employees, encourage them, and influence them in a good way. We have, for example, Lance Armstrong. Another trait that you need is integrity. Okay, the quality of being honest and trustworthiness is one of the most important traits of a leader. If a leader is not honest, they will lose trust and people will not look at them as leaders anymore. And the fifth and the last trait is a leader's inclination to seek out pleasant social relationships. Okay, we have, let's say, you are a leader, you need to always maintain a good relationship with your surroundings. You need to have good connections with those that you have, for example, business with. We have something called the five-factor personality model and leadership, which is basically linking five core personality traits: openness, consciousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. That says, let's say, you connect these traits to leader effectiveness and the style. Okay, if you evaluate these traits in a person, it will tell you how effective a leader is and what is their leadership style. These are the five traits. Neuroticism is basically the tendency to be depressed, anxious, insecure, vulnerable, and hostile. Okay, how, let's say, how does these traits are in you will affect your leadership? We have extraversion, which basically the tendency to be sociable and assertive and to have positive energy, and it is the opposite of the first trait. We have openness, which is the tendency to be informed, creative, insightful, and curious, basically, to always be able to learn and to want to learn new things. Agreeableness, the tendency to be accepting, conforming, and trusting and nurturing others also. And the last one is consciousness, which is basically the tendency to be thorough, organized, controlled, and dependable and decisive.